And so that is fiat. And people, again, they keep are trained to keep thinking that they're talking about a piece of paper relative to the Federal Reserve note called the dollar bill, when actually that's a front and a cover up for the fiat, which is actually the declaratory authority, i.e. color of authority, and the issuances of any legislation under de facto constructs pretending to be legitimate and pretending to be de jure law. That is fiat. And the private commercial paper that they have presented to the people, i.e. this called Federal Reserve notes, is for bookkeeping purposes only, for what you would call electrical currency energy output. Therefore, what this represents is life force energy. Keep this in mind. This represents bookkeeping entries for life force energy output, calculated factually, just like a machine. And that's where the administration of they call accounting actually comes from. And this is again why you'll see natural beings working and generating what is told to them is monetary accumulation. They think it means wealth, and yet at the same time there's a whole industry that's layered on top of it, whereas the average being, so-called educated, cannot even count that they need an accountant to count the fiat output, input, debit, and expenditures, because they can't even count. Why? Because all operations under the fiat system violates totally the fundamental logical principles of arithmetic. And so you see average people doing a job, generating what they think is wealth, and they always end up being in debt. And it never dawns on them that they need an accountant, because it's not based in rational math. It's based in fiat, i.e. birthright theft. Now, that's the truth. The platforms and the systems of double bookkeeping and joint stock trust operations, which is operating on the land under the jurisdiction of the United States corporation operatives, courier members, etc., in your federal, state, and local political jurisdictions, etc., all is fiat and does not harmonize with fundamental elementary math, because it's not based on fundamental math. It's based on theft. It is based on extortion. It is based on transferring of estates. And therefore, they need bookkeeping systems that defy logic. And that creates another business model for other Roman members to be given degrees to keep books for the executor's chamber and the executor's bills and the executor division, which are collectively the U.S. Department of Treasury, which is simply the renaming of the executor's chambers. And those who do not meet the tithe tax systems of Rome under the Spanish Inquisition are jailed. Now, that's the truth. And also their wealth being confiscated. This is where the commercial mercenary operators garnish people's accounts that they think that are theirs that are not theirs, where they steal people's properties, where they steal and confiscate people's businesses, where they steal and confiscate people's finances that they think is money, etc., etc. They're licensed vouchers, because that's what they actually are. And that platform, and not just the instrumentality known as US dollar bills, is the fiat. So when you're dealing with the federal U.S. federal government operations, the U.S. corporate states of operations, your local, municipal, and township governing agency operations, all of them are fiat. All of them are de facto. In order to administer and maintain the operations, the bookkeeping systems are done through Federal Reserve notes of the Jesuit order and members of the Circle Church and Chancery, of the British Accredited Registry, etc. And that is also known as the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve, and their administrative board of directors are known as the Congress and the Senate for the U.S., etc. And that's what's been going on. So when you're looking at fiat, don't just look at the instrument that people have been calling a dollar bill. You must look at the entire political platform, from the governing administrative clerks and their offices, the entire educational system under their jurisdiction, the entire banking system under their jurisdiction, the entire administrative government structures under the fake bays known as governors, and including all your administrators and contractors of your municipal, townships, and boroughs, etc., are all de facto. De facto is fiat. That must be understood. So do not limit your thoughts to the instrument that you call the Federal Reserve note when you're thinking fiat. That is a designed misdirection. That is a design frame of thinking that has allowed this corruption to go on to this day. And again, as was mentioned earlier, what do? Essentially, and we've done this before, and you can refer back to some of the classes that we've given earlier called reversion of the state. Because basically you must make a claim, and it must be in your proper person, and make that claim publicly in order to neutralize the capacity of the members of the Roman Curia to comfortably and safely, as far as their economic trade is concerned, to trade the treasury bonds with other nation states and other entities around the planet Midgard in order to maintain their economic power structure. And back to point, the fact of the matter is that it has collapsed, and the credit and the trade windows of the world have frozen up. That's what's going on now. And the coronavirus and all this other stuff going on is a cover-up for those operations, including the civil war that's going on that no one speaks about openly or publicly. That's a fact. Any other questions?
Thank you so much. Here we go.
For the most part, the encouragement is to look at some of these things that we've pointed out to you, so you can have a comprehension on why some of these things we brought up to your attention. Because mainly, and this is redundant, is that people's concept of fiat is so constricted and limited, wrongly constricted and limited, that we wanted to, because it goes deeper than that even, that we wanted to expand your minds in the nature of it. Because when you have a comprehension of what's going on, your thoughts change. And when your thoughts change, you change. And when you change, the conditions change, i.e. the changes in you. And that's the real truth. And then when we have, as we evolve into a collective change, etc., then of course the fraud cannot go on, because the fictions and the fictitious entities that were constructed to maintain the Spanish Inquisition will, by virtue of a lack of faith, die, because the fiat depends on faith. But the faith must be blind, i.e. the faith must be in the dark. So the people must be in the dark in order for the fiat to live, and the fiat must live in order for them to continue to steal your birthright. You neutralize that, and it's a spiraling effect. That's what's going on. That's a fact.
One of the things we mentioned when we were talking earlier, we were talking about, you mentioned the fact that fiat, or money as we know it, is a biological weapon. And I don't know if
this is the fact. In the rule, in the divine rule, or divine law of cause and effect, you know, like as an example, you know how like one of the favorite things that the Jesuits have done, and they do it with nations to today, even with their vaccines. One of their favorite things to do is to poison. This is why they do the gym. This is why they poison the food. And this is also why they poison children through vaccines, etc. That's one of their favorite things to do. So the fiat operations is actually poisoning civilization. It creates stress, and stress creates hypertension, creates sickness. Then you couple that with poisoned food, and then you have a biological response effect. And so, which is what you would call a staged operations of biological attack done under the guise of economics. There you go.
the other thing I asked you about had to do with whether or not there was the use of sigil magic. When you look at the symbology that's on the dollar, where they're using them, just like say Nike uses the swoosh, which is part of
the sigil magic is, you can look at it two ways. Let's look at it like this. The sigil is really a signal, a symbols, symbols. All right. Look at it as, look at the dark use of it as a psychic attack, and that would be more appropriate to what's happening, because the sigil magic does not necessarily mean always a negative.
Right, because I use sigils.
You know, because sigil magic is African culture. It is African culture. Now, the issue with it is, has it been misrepresented? As in, let me give you a perfect example of sigil magic. You'll see the hybrid Europeans call Asiatic women devil worshippers. As an example, you'll see, let's say Beyonce may wear a costume with horns, right? And they'll say, look, that's Baphomet, that's the devil. What that really is, that is, she's claiming to be Isis, daughter of the moon, which is what our women is. That deals with fecundity, that deals with fertility. That has nothing to do with no devil whatsoever. But the hybrid European calls it the devil so that we attach to it. And then they use it secretly only to the dark side. That's the key. That must be understood. Well, just like when you see the goat's head, or like you'll see, even to the day, you'll see in some parts of Khalifa's territory, even in Texas, you'll see them even still having cow horns. They put them on the car. That's the daughter of the moon. Yeah.
They're not representing the fact that they're cowboys. That's you. Okay.
You know, but in other words, you know, like our people say, the hybrid European, they'll say the white man, which means the sovereign. The sovereign made us hate ourselves. That's an example of it. You look at the average African, they'll see that. Look at that. Well, she's an devil worshiper and shit. No, I'm saying that's their stuff. And then the European uses it. He gets us to abandon it, and he uses it, except that he uses it to the dark side. That's all. And you got to remember, look at the hybrid European. They're recessive, so a lot of their decisions will be recessive. They're not necessarily, you know how, like we say, you've got to put all this together and kind of look at what were the ancient Chaldeans and Mesopotamians, etc., and Sabians, what were they really considering when they did the outcast of the hybrids, of the Albions? Because they said, basically, this is true, this is researchable. They had no soul, and they outcast them. Interesting thing, whatever the basis of their analysis, and spiritual insight. The hybrid has proven it to be true as to why they did it. Now, as far as our cognizance is right now, as far as using the psychic clairvoyance that was normal in African culture, where they could look at them and see that they were soulless and outcast them, there's also a price to that, because everything has cause and effect. And here now they come back to haunt us. You can also look at it this way. Let's look at it this way. For those who know Aunt Hagar's history in Central America and Hammurabi, right? Hammurabi Bay's law, right? And you look at the children of Israel, right? And that's really hybriding, you know. And the Hammurabi's code of law and the hostilities that the children of Israel show. So look at the book of genetics, and you look at Rebecca, right? Then look at Isaac, and then look at the plea of Isaac to the Most High in relationship to her womb, and that she was barren. And then the Most High says she will bear, but they will be two different manner of people, two different nations.
How does that?
That, when you look into African history, now one was ruddy, hairy. Now ruddy, hairy. Now when you look in Germanic language of Central Africa, etc., coming from Sanskrit. Roman means red man. Ruddy, red skin.
But how does that reconcile with the Jacobian experiment?
Now that's the point. Now you're starting to tie that history together. Then also why some Africans, they didn't even tear them cities down. They didn't tear those complexes down. They let the jungles grow over them. And to this very day, do you see archaeologists going in Central Africa, i.e. Central Mexico, and doing archaeological studies on them ancient scientific complexes in Mexico that they let grow over? They'll talk about pyramids all over the place. They'll talk about Olmec, Stoneheads, etc. Nobody talks about Plateau Negro. That's the monkey plateaus where the experiments were done, i.e. Yakub.
So that's
Cushitis, Israel, where you get Caucasian from, Cushitis, and they also call him the father of the devil. Then you look at why is it when you look at the plateau, right, and even from some of the outskirts, and they've been hiding it. Some of it has coming out recently, but they have always hidden the clear glyphical evidence of interplanetary travel. Fact. Now, then you look at, when you go into the congressional records, when you go into the history of Yakub in the congressional records, and they talk about the hybriding, etc., and that he was also referred to sometimes as the father of the devil, because it was not just the Negro Yavera Arebo zygote implantations with the 12 Moorish women scientists. It was also suspected that certain technology trades were done with off-world beings, and they used some of the women for incubators. And that's the origin of this cannibalistic hybrid European that is so anti-human, because he's not human.
So you're saying that they did more, and I know we're not talking about money now, but they did
it's
more.
Still money.
Well, okay, so they did more experimentation than the 12 Moorish scientist, a female
See,
scientist.
they talk about Yakub. They don't talk about the 12 women.
Who were scientists who.
And the bouquet experiments.
Well, who did the bouquet experiment?
That's what that was about.
Why was that called a bouquet? Because there are different kinds
for each of the constellations of this particular solar system and the body structures.
So in order to create all of
yes, it's called the bouquet.
An archetype or phenotype.
There you now you're looking at what Charles Darwin was talking about, but he keeps talking about this missing link. The missing link is that information. It's not a skeleton. They'll never find a skeleton because it don't damn exist. It is the knowledge of the hybrid experiments in Yucatan. This is why when Hitler was running them hybrids out of Germany, who were not altogether human, who were killing Germany's economy, they said, we're going back home to Patagonia. They even have a lot of plays in Europe about Patagonia. What's Patagonia? Argentina.
The Three Stooges used to say something about Patagonia.
That's let me say this. See, because we're not off, but we're getting into knowledge that most people aren't exposed to. Mm-hmm. However, they have some inferences of it. Because we have to talk about these things honestly, because we have to start solving this human condition on this planet, because civilization is collapsing.
So I was told that, or I read something, that at one point when we had to take them, say, to Europa, Caucasus Mountains to Europa.
Patagonia, they took them to Patmos.
Well, when we took them
off Turkey.
When we took them to a place where the climate was more conducive to their
land of Angles. Land of Angles. That's where Anglican comes from.
Right. So when we took them there were maybe extraterrestrial visitations that came to them and said, look what they've done to you. We will give
you got the deals that was made with Eisenhower in '54.
Right. It
wasn't just past tense. It's even up to modern times. No one wants to talk about this because we've always interchanged with off-world beings. It's not new. It's not talked about to the public.
But I was told, or I read or heard that these off-world beings came to some of they're referred
to as Anunnaki in general.
Okay,
but that's just a term that means from heaven. It's not the name of them.
They came from the heaven.
Multiple.
It's what they did.
Yeah, multiple species.
Just like Hebrew is those who crossed over. Is what
exactly. There's no such thing.
So when they came to them, they were saying, look what the Moors did to you.
Thank you.
Look how they rejected you. Look how they put you over here on this God-forsaken place. Let us give you technology. We'll give you some knowledge, and we'll give you the ability to overtake and overthrow them.
Now, this is the problem that they're having. They didn't think that they would be sacrificed.
Also.
Exactly. This is why you see a lot of them starting to tell the truth about Moors, Masons, and aliens, because it's really true. The true condition of the human condition on Midgard is not spoken of except in secret societies, and even then is given in sigil forms called allegories and stories. But when you're dealing with, now you understand also Carlos Linnaeus with the phenotype structure operations of 1735 that was adopted into the U.S. Census Bureau operations, and they made up this brand code system that didn't exist in the ancient world. This whole race argument didn't exist at all. It's a fraud. It is fiat.
Is there human race and hybrid race?
Now you understand why the sun seeks to kill the hybrid, because it's not natural to this planet. It's not natural. Now you see why they're trying to block the sun? See why they're trying to block the sun?
But also they're doing a lot of so-called racial.
That's why they're doing it now. They're trying to survive. Why? Even in the fake royal family, why they got a mixed hybrid to marry in, because they will die out. Then after, same thing they did with Matuaka, then after they get the seed, they're going to kill her. They always do. I'm telling you the truth, you know, we're getting, and guess what? We're still talking money. And we're still talking fiat. The issue is that people don't recognize that it's connected. Their concepts are limited. Do you understand what I'm saying? This thing is layered. You know how it is. People who really don't understand an onion, they talk about the skin, and they talk about the onion. They have no concept of layers.
When you peel it,
that fiat is layers.
It's the lies.
It is the platform, the entire platform, not the instrumentality for transfer of voucher. As a matter of fact, that's the weakest part of it. And yet that's the distraction. And it has worked quite well, hasn't it?
It sure has.
However, people are discovering that things aren't what they seem on multiple levels.
It appears that when you think in terms of fiat, a lot of us over here think about the U.S. Federal Reserve note, but you got the pound.
It's all around the world.
You got the British pound. You got
it's all around the world.
Everybody who's got this paper.
Now you're looking at the connection.
Right.
The world connection is not just here.
Right.
Now you understand.
That's why they can shut the world down.
Because that was the purpose. That was the mission. It's bigger than people think it is.
Yeah.
And guess what? Well, now that you brought it up, a little bit of the off-world stuff is getting ready to start coming out, because we're talking about it. Because every time we talk, we go a little deeper. We'll go a little deeper. We'll go a little deeper. And when we do, it pulls the roaches out.
Well, when we talk about off-world, could we potentially be also talking about inner world or Agatha?
Inner and off-world. You talk
off.
about terrestrial, interterrestrial, and extraterrestrial.
Because there's
a trinity of actions: terrestrial, interterrestrial, or extraterrestrial.
And USO. And
that's
underwater.
Extraterrestrial. That's interterrestrial.
Okay. Underground, underwater.
There's terrestrial, surface. Interterrestrial, underground. Octoterrestrial,
underwater.
Water. Extraterrestrial, off circuit.
Off circuit. Okay.
Planet enter, sphere, travel, and folding, cycle folding, because really the traveling is not altogether done in the concepts that people look at. Like, for instance, as an example, when I talked to you earlier today, and you told me that you were at a store and that the storm was on, and you had to come from point A to point B.
Right.
Now, because the people in general have not been told the truth about us, truthfully, it's hard for them to understand point A to point B doesn't always operate like that. It often operates like this, according to push and pull of the universe. Look, what I'm doing.
Bending.
Hold on.
Okay. Warping.
Hold on. And at that point, they always use the calculation, then they make the crossover. That's how they travel from planet to planet without losing years. And it's always been that way. And that's the truth. Now, they want to get into that because people can. I don't get into that mainly because my interest, my missionary interest is this: to deal with the immediate sickness. Meaning it's sort of like I prefer, and that's just me. It's not everybody's mission.
Right.
That's just me. I prefer to seek in what is said, the kingdom of heaven, and let the other things come along, rather than focus on all those little things that will scatter the people when they need to deal with what's before them.
Well, and I get it, because too many things will have people confused.
They're scattered. They don't have the basis. They don't look at this. well, look at what you know. Look at what you know from your experience, truthfully. And this is just point, when I read a lot of your poetry, to be honest with you, you know, just being a poet myself, I see the multi-level thought process that takes place at one time, which is why you can flow so easily. I'm not saying what you respect of it or not. I'm not saying or even trying to analyze you recognizing that even yourself. I recognize it. Because I think multi-level. So it's like my sister in a way. So, but I don't make it an issue. But I learned from childhood as I grew up that I thought was normal is not necessarily as common amongst these beings here as I thought it was.